I am delighted to be joined from Cincinnati in the United States by Daniel Lewis, who is the host of the award-winning podcast, The Audacity to Podcast. I love that name. And also somebody who collaborates and is involved in International Podcast Day. Daniel, you're very welcome to JSB Talks Digital, and thank you for joining me at 8:30 in the morning from Cincinnati.
Thank you very much, Joanne. I love the accent, and maybe I hope your audience loves my nice, standard, mixed up, like American accent as well. But I love podcasting.
And listen, they're all giving you the likes here on Facebook Live, so thumbs up for you and for your accent. Tell me a little bit, first of all, how you got into podcasting. I mean, I was a broadcast journalist, so that was a natural step for me, but tell me a little bit about your story.
It's a two-part story. The first part is when I discovered podcasts, and that was when Apple and Steve Jobs from the stage announced that iTunes 4.9 would be coming out in June 2005, and it would support podcasting, or what really was podcasts, not the act of podcasting, but consuming podcasts. And he talked about how it would be these amateurs as well as professional broadcasters all sharing content. And I don't exactly remember how I came across that. Either I was watching the keynote or maybe a supervisor at my office told me about it. But whatever the case, I got interested in podcasts, so I thought, I'll check it out. I found several podcasts like This Week in Tech, Jesus Geek, and Grammar Girl podcast, and I loved them because they were niche content. So for 2 years, I was listening to podcasts, and at some point, the light bulb just went off in my mind thinking, hey, wait, I know how to do this kind of thing. I know how to edit audio. I know how to tell a story or share a message. I have a public speaking background. I have a website development and design background. I think I could have my own podcast. So in 2007, I launched my first podcast, which was the Ramen Noodle Clean Comedy podcast, and really struggled in podcasting for a couple of years until I decided to take it serious. And then when I launched The Audacity to Podcast, it was because I felt I had something to say in the space of podcasting, some value to contribute. And then that has been going really well for these 7 years now since I launched that.
Well, it's going so well that you're a multi-award winning podcaster. And also, you have the title of being involved in the #1 unofficial podcast for ABC's hit drama, Once Upon a Time. How did this happen?
Originally, a friend, a co-host for my comedy podcast, and I were fans of the TV show Lost. And I had this idea of, just after I'd gotten married, my wife had never seen Lost. And my friend and I had seen Lost, and we knew how it ended and all the theories. So we had this idea of, let's do a podcast where we rewatch the TV show Lost. And my wife joins us for the first half of the podcast. And then the second half of the podcast, it's just he and I. So you'd get kind of the newbie perspective and the seasoned perspective. But then he said, hey, instead of doing that, there's this new TV show coming out by some of the same guys who worked on Lost. And it looks like it might have some of the same storytelling approaches to it, where you have flashbacks and character development and theories and Easter eggs and all of this stuff. Maybe we should do a podcast about that instead. So the show had already started. I watched the first episode of the TV show and I loved it. I thought, yes, this is great. Let's go ahead and do this podcast. So we very quickly tried to catch up with watching the TV show episodes, recording podcasts for every episode. Then we launched and found a whole new community of people who love the TV show, love to dig into the depth of a TV show based on fairy tales. And we have such diverse conversations. And so connecting with that passionate community is so rewarding now.
Is it really important to follow a niche, or a niche as we pronounce it in Ireland, when it comes to podcasting? Because we have the opportunity to share and to grow our community from the social web, and some people say that we live in a surplus society. How important is going niche with your podcast?
It's extremely important because these people who have massive budgets like Gimlet and Public Radio and Panoply and all of these major corporations getting into podcasting have big budgets. They'll have a team of 20 or 30 people working on one episode of a podcast and making a really high-end production. They have to make that kind of podcast appeal to a very broad audience. Like, I'm not sure how it is with you there in Ireland, but here in America on talk radio, there are basically about 8 different topics that talk radio covers. That's like sports, politics, finances, religion, relationships, and a few other topics as well. And it's always those things. Whereas podcasts are so much more diverse. So with these people who come from a corporate background, they have to appeal to the extremely broad audience. So they make very broad topics and they really produce it well. However, you and I can appeal to a niche that might be so small, these corporations can't monetize it. They can't make the millions of dollars they need to from an audience of 100 or 1,000. But you and I can start a show and we can find great profit in a small audience, even if the profit does not mean money. So in a niche, and this is what's so exciting about podcasting, is that it feeds the passions and it's powered by passions. I was at an event once where I asked everyone, hey, raise your hand if you played video games as a kid. Raise your hand if you played video games on a computer. Raise your hand if you played video games on a PC Junior. And 2 people raised their hand at that point. Then I said, raise your hand if you played King's Quest on a PC Junior in the 80s. One guy raised his hand, and without my prompting it, his response was, oh yeah. When I hit the niche, that's when I hit the passion. So that's why the niches are so important in podcasting. They're so much more valuable because you're getting the exact audience you want.
Tell me then, let's talk about monetization. So you heard me say that I've been able to get consulting clients and training work from my podcast. I don't have any sponsors. My company sponsors the show. So it's content only. But I have seen the huge value in doing this show every week, week in, week out for 67 weeks. It differentiates me in the digital marketing space. I can talk to the audience that are potentially going to work with me. And hey, I get access to a whole new network. How have you monetized your podcast?
My podcast audience is too small to have a sponsor. But for the Audacity podcast, which is my main podcast, my business exists because of the podcast. So I am monetizing through affiliates. Like I'll talk about a microphone, a mixer, some software, something like that. And when I can, I'll use an affiliate link. I don't only recommend things that have affiliate links. So ethics and integrity have to be supreme in what I recommend. But when I recommend something genuinely and I'm providing relevant value, people will buy that stuff. And then when I start creating my own products and services to help podcasters, because I've already built this reputation for over 10 years of podcasting and providing lots of value with over 300 episodes of the Audacity podcast, then when I say, hey, I'm launching this course or this product or this service because I know their needs and I already have a relationship with them, they're far more likely to buy from me. In fact, one of the members of my podcaster society said, when he knew I was launching something, he said, I almost didn't care what it was. I knew as long as it was within my budget, I would buy it if it was from you.
Wow.
That's the power of podcasting.
Yeah. So let's talk about International Podcast Day. Obviously, I found International Podcast Day because I used the hashtag podcasting and podcaster, and it came into my Twitter feed. I immediately went to the website, messaged you guys and said, will you come on my show? Dave said, well, Joanne, I'm in California. It'll be the middle of the night. And I said, well, that doesn't matter. Just get up. But then he said, no, I've got a better option. I'll send you Daniel. So thank you for joining me. But it's so great to celebrate the whole world of podcasting and to meet new people. What was the motivation to set it up in the first place?
I'm not sure how it is in other countries, but in the United States, we have a day for pretty much everything. There are the obvious things like, national holidays and religious holidays or pagan holidays and such. Then there are the less known things like National Donut Day or International Talk Like a Pirate Day or National Senior Citizens Day, National Aunts and Uncles Day. So Steve Lee, the founder of International Podcast Day, was listening to the radio on a rare occasion for him since he loves podcasts. But he was listening to the radio and they said something about, hey, it's Senior Citizens Day. Come get your discount at whatever place. And he thought, wait a minute. Okay, senior citizens are great. And donuts are fun and stuff like that. But podcasts have such life-changing power to them. My life was significantly changed with podcasting. We change other people's lives through the podcast that we produce, whatever kind of podcast you produce. And he thought there's so much change connected with podcasts, so much power in podcasts. We need a day to celebrate that power, whether we are fans or creators. And thus, we started the conversation about planning a global event. And in 2014 was the launch of the first International Podcast Day. It's now September 30th every year, and it has been officially proclamated in the state of California. And I'm sure other states will follow suit. And we've seen other companies like Apple get on board and tweet things out and talk and celebrate podcasting in certain ways. So it's this opportunity to celebrate the amazing niche content that we find as content consumers, and the opportunity to celebrate this incredible power we have to share a message as content creators.
How can people get involved in International Podcast Day? It's September 30th, so it's tomorrow for us in Ireland, and I think tomorrow for you as well.
Yeah.
How can people get involved?
One way is, if you enjoy talking about podcasting and enjoy the conversation about podcasts, go to internationalpodcastday.com and click on the giant button so you can watch the live stream. We're doing a 30-hour live stream that starts in New Zealand. There's a lot of US sessions in it, but there are other sessions from around the world. So you can watch for all 30 hours if you want, and enjoy the conversation about podcasting. Some of it's technical, some of it's practical, some of it's just celebrating the power we have in podcasting. The other thing you can do is go out there and start the conversation with people. Ask people, hey, do you listen to podcasts? And if they say something like, oh yeah, I listen to Serial, or I listen to this public radio podcast, or I listen to these big name podcasts, try and help them find a niche podcast. One of the things I love to do is I ask people, what's your favorite TV show? And then I show them, look, here are a dozen podcasts about your favorite TV show. They're interviewing some of the cast. They're talking about Easter eggs. They're doing these cool things. So connect to other people with podcasts they might like. And the other thing that you can do, even if you don't have the opportunity to get out, or you're not brave enough to do man on the street kind of stuff like that, is send positive stuff to the podcasts you enjoy. Write a review for them. Send them feedback. Share their podcast. Maybe even simply post on Facebook a list of your favorite can't miss podcasts. So start that conversation and celebrate with us this amazing content we have access to.
Finally, Daniel, tell everybody where they can listen to your podcast and also find out more about you. I'm sure you've got a website.
Yeah, go to theaudacitytopodcast.com. That's the home for my free podcast about podcasting, over 300 episodes out now. And that also links to the products and services and other resources that I create for podcasters. But you can get a huge education on how to either launch or improve your podcast over at theaudacitytopodcast.com. And you can reach out to me from there, or follow me on Twitter at @TheDanielJLewis.
Fantastic. The Daniel J. Lewis. Thank you so much for joining me from Cincinnati in the United States, somewhere near Chicago, I believe. Thank you so much for coming on JSB Talks Digital. Happy International Podcast Day.
Happy International Podcast Day to you too, and all of your listeners from all over the globe.
See you later.